Many of you know this event started as a virtual event, but then we realized in order to get more richness from the community and to allow the community to interact with one another, that we needed to turn this into an in-person event. The event is being recorded, and that recording will be available online so that those people who could not attend will have visibility into the work we're doing today. Before getting into the sort of the details and the instructions of the day, I want to acknowledge a few people. One, I want to acknowledge several members of the City Council, including Alderwoman Mitz, who you'll be hearing from shortly. In addition, we may have some state representatives here. I know that we have some faith leaders here. I also want to acknowledge there is Mayor's Office and City of Chicago staff here, including Commissioner Dr. Allison Arwady, our Commissioner for the Department of Family and Support Services, Brandy Kanazi. We're expecting the CPS CEO, Pedro Martinez, to come, and other members of the mayor's team and the city's team are here. But before speaking too much, I wanted to invite Alderwoman Mitz, because Burnett's sitting in front of me, to come up. She is the Alderwoman for the 37th Ward, and she is the chair of the Black West Side elected officials and the chair of the License and Consumer Protections Committee in City Council. Alderwoman.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Now that's the type of voice I like to hear over on the west side of Chicago. We usually raise our voice so that we can be heard. And I'm so glad to see you all out this morning. Coming out of the pandemic has been very troubling scene for many of us and our families. And I'm sure you've experienced some of those symptoms as you were trying to navigate through it for the last 2 years. But I'm here to tell you the best is still yet to come. Now, if you all can agree with me, you should be really shouting because we're still here. That's right. So many are already gone. We can't do nothing about what has been in the past. I wish we could go back and grab it. But I learned as a child, what's in the past is in the past. But it's nothing wrong with looking back over your shoulders to see where you've been brought to today. Now, we are here today to talk about our public safety. And I'm sure there's some brilliant minds in this room. Very brilliant minds. The only thing that we need to do, you might not want to hear it, but we must work together. Put your differences aside, take off your titles, take off your egos, and let's save some life. Let's make it better for the next generation coming behind us who feel that there's no hope. If you think you don't have any, wait till the next generation and you're not past any of that worthy cause that you've lived for back to your children. So I'm here today to say, let's get some work done over here on this west side. Certainly you have all of us working together, but I'm saying there needs to be more togetherness. No one body sits by themselves. Better together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alderwoman. Alderman Burnett, you want to say something? Sure. We got two West Side champions here.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Alderman Walter Burnett, identified as he and him, because she called me Alderwoman Burnett. But so I'm Alderman Walter Burnett. First of all, I want to commend all of you for being here. A lot of you have been in the trenches for a long time. A lot of you are dedicated to your community in spite of the challenges that we have in our neighborhood. You guys have persistently and consistently been involved. So I just want to thank you all for not giving up on your community. I also want to thank those who work with the young people. You know, we tend to think that all young people are bad, but that's not the case. We have a lot of great young people in our community, and we still need to nurture them and help them. And even if they're in those gray areas, it's up to us to try to turn them around. So we need to continue to work with them. One of our biggest challenges in our community is folks have been giving up. They've been getting complacent. I've saw a lot of block clubs slow down or stop altogether. I saw people who live with each other stop communicating with each other about what's going on their blocks. We need to get back in gear, and we need to take charge of our community and get back involved. Also, one of the things that I've seen a lot of carpetbaggers coming to the community, right? A lot of folks who come to our neighborhoods and do their trades or do the violence that they're doing in the neighborhood don't come from our neighborhoods. We need to get back in gear in our neighborhoods and make folks who come to our neighborhoods respect our neighborhoods. But first, we have to respect each other. So we cannot encourage other folks not to come to our neighborhood if we're not talking to each other in the neighborhood, if we're not communicating with each other in the neighborhood, if we're not letting the young kid down the block who's just standing out there cut our grass and give them a couple of dollars. You know, we need to get back involved and make the neighborhoods a neighborhood again so that other folks will respect our neighborhoods. Again, I want to commend those who have been involved, been in the trenches, doing a lot of great things. I've seen some folks in our neighborhood who have not only started their own block club, but they have encouraged blocks around them to start block clubs. And that's the kind of energy that we need. But also at the same time, they go to the CAP meetings, they stay involved with the police. You know, those things are very important. Definitely, we need more on the west side. We don't have enough. We need more police attention. We need more help over here. We have some challenges in our neighborhood, and as the neighborhoods are evolving and changing, and different people are moving to the neighborhood, you have different things that are happening. We need more help. So I'm not going to stand here and tell you it's rosy. I'm not going to tell you that, you know, it's easy, but I will tell you, and I like for all of the administration and folks that's here from the police department, the mayor's office, and everybody else, we need more help here on the west side because we have good people in our neighborhoods. Folks want to be safe. Folks want to be comfortable. Folks want to not have to worry about their children. We need more help. We need more attention, and we thank you all for having this meeting today. Thank you.
And Alderman Burnett, I apologize. I was actually calling Alderwoman Mitz by your name, so I merged you two, so I apologize. I want to start today by outlining for everyone what they can expect today. I know some of you walked in and it was like, whoa, this isn't like a town hall. There's no microphone. It's not set up, you know, sort of like theater style, and that's all intentional. There are three things that we want to achieve today. First, we want to share with all of you the information that we have about the mayor's public safety response efforts. Everyone in this room, including law enforcement, knows that law enforcement is not the response to public safety. We've got to go. We have to go to root cause work. We have to go to dealing with unresolved trauma, and you'll hear more about the work that we're doing in that area. We also want to be thought partners with you. And that's part of the reason why you're at tables, and part of the reasons why you got numbers and you were divided up is so that there is an opportunity for each table to talk about what are the 5 things that we need to see in order to make our city safe? And each of those sheets will be collected and is going to get compiled into a master list for the West Side, and we'll read it out at the end so that you know that the work you're doing at the table is captured, and that is going to be recorded in our work. You also have on your table a sheet with a UR, I never know those things, UR codes. Can somebody hold up what that looks like? QR. I'm not techie, I'm old. Thank you. If you click on that QR code, there's actually a survey in there, some very quick questions. So please check on those too, because that's also going to guide our work and give us help in what we should be doing and how we incorporate the thought leadership of the community too. And then third, and I know this is why most of you all are here, we want to answer your questions. The mayor and the superintendent will be arriving around 11, and so you'll be at the tail end of your table work. They'll probably walk around to tables. We have some members of CPD, some members of our other departments in the room, so you may have city people at the table with you rotating through. The reason why we don't have microphones is because in our experience, there may be 20 people with the same question. And so we are asking you to write your question on the sheets that you received both when you checked in, and there are sheets on your table. If you have more questions, there will be people walking around who can give you more sheets and more questions. Those questions are going to be compiled into sort of like questions, and we will be reading, for example, there may be 20 questions on why isn't there more mental health support, and we'll be able to respond to that. There will be other questions about police funding, and we'll be able to respond to that. Nothing about this process is to dodge hard questions, because honestly, the hardest and toughest questions are the questions that help us too. And so no one's trying to dodge them. We're trying to make sure we can get to every question. And by compiling them, we'll also know those areas that are most important to the city and to the people on the West Side. And finally, I want to thank a few people, because we pulled this together really fast, and I don't get a chance to thank my staff who has to put up with me. So I want to thank my staff. I want to thank other mayor office staff and other city staff. I want to thank AIS, especially Sherry Jimenez, because this room would not be like this and we would have no sound if it weren't for AIS. And I want to thank the Park District for their help in allowing us to use this room. And most importantly, I want to thank the staff of our Community Safety Coordination Center, CSCC. They are the real brains behind this operation. And now I'm going to introduce you to Tamara Mahal, who's going to tell you about the work she's doing in the Community Safety Coordination Center. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. As Tina mentioned, my name is Tamara Mahal. I am the Chief Coordination Officer for Mayor Lightfoot for Community Safety, and I'm going to talk about what that means here in a second. We just wanted to I'm not going to talk for long. We want to make sure we reserve time for your discussions, but also so that we can answer the questions that you have. But we wanted to do a quick acknowledgement and a level setting about the city's approach to community safety and violence reduction across the city, but also in specific communities where we know we see significantly higher levels of violence than others. And so first things first, I want to start by saying that across the city, we acknowledge that violence is just a symptom of other deeper root causes that have led to conditions that breed violence, right? We know that we have schools that we need to improve. We know that we have public services that have been under-resourced. We know that mistrust between police, law enforcement, and the community have led to certain conditions. We know that we need more housing, and we know that poverty and income equality breed the degradation of the physical environment, lead to increased gun carrying so people feel safer. That creates a level of trauma in our communities that creates a number of students who are disengaged from school, and that we see high rates of long-term unemployment, and that is what is leading to the violence that we're seeing. This means that, as Tina said, we cannot have a law enforcement only approach. We have to take a step back and really address these root causes, both in the near term, but also with long-term sustainable funding and solutions in service of community so that we can address these issues. It's also important to acknowledge something that's not on this slide that we talk about every day and that we know is really at the core of all of these root causes, which is the role that structural racism has played in our Black and brown communities across the city. And therefore, we have to take and apply that lens to the work that we're doing. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what that means and what we're doing, but I think it's just as important for us to actually talk about how we're doing it. The city and the mayor's administration learned a lot about what works and what doesn't work best during COVID. I was in a privileged position to work with Dr. Arwady on a number of roles through COVID, but specifically in helping to lead the vaccine operation. And we learned that the government functions best when it is acting not just in service of community, but when it's allowing community to lead on the strategies that are going to be successful. And we know that that's something we have to apply here to our biggest epidemic, which is gun violence. We also learned the role that data has to play in driving what we're doing, that quantitative information has to play a key focus, but so does applying what our community members know about what's going on to help guide those strategies. And I think incredibly importantly, we learned what can happen when we coordinate the might of government. And I'm not just talking about the city, but I'm talking about with our partners at the county and the state. Thrilled to see Chris Patterson sitting over here. In order to take what we know are some tremendous resources and apply it against that problem. And as a result of knowing we needed to do this, the mayor activated something new called the Community Safety Coordination Center in August. The reality is that we have a lot of resources at government, we have a lot of influence. We need to be better coordinated in order to be able to rapidly respond with the things that are needed in order to support community, and not just on the community level, but in a hyper-local way. One of the number one questions that I get is, what do you mean when you say hyper-local? It's such a fair question. I'm talking about the block level. That means, yes, incentivizing block clubs, which we want to come with new resources to help do, but it also means looking at the physical environment, the vacant lots, the different issues that we know are contributing to violence both on our most violent blocks, but also in other areas of the community, and really engaging with you as community members at that block level to start there and form new strategies to address violence. So what does that mean for how we're doing this, right? For what we're doing. I'm just going to highlight where our key strategies sit, both on the long-term and a near-term basis. So we have been doing extensive engagement over the past 6 months, really just to better understand what are the key things that we can do as the government to help community. And one of the first things that's been pointed out, especially by our community-based organizations, whether they're in violence prevention or housing or mental health, better coordination. Just seems like such a simple thing, but takes time and effort. So we are going to be working at the community level to help provide the staff and the resources need, really just to coordinate amongst the agencies that are already here doing that vital work. We also heard that mental health is a significant concern because of the amount of trauma that community violence inflicts. And so, yes, the Chicago Department of Public Health is already working to implement a mental health equity plan, but we're coming back with near-term solutions about how we can implement a trauma-informed response today. We also know that we have to improve the block level. We have to increase green space. So we're doing things like planting trees, putting together long-term affordable housing plans. We also know that we need to work to bring jobs back. So there's new investments in commercial corridors in the long term to help develop them, but in the short term, also to ensure people feel safe shopping and working there. And we know that youth, and when we talk about youth, we mean ages up to 24, are critical, not just a critical part of this solution, but that we have to work to provide opportunities, not just to ensure they stay engaged in school, but they have the supports necessary to get to long-term employment opportunities. And then finally, I just want to say, we also acknowledge and know that the role between police and the community has to be improved. And so, of course, the police department is working on new reforms to their policies, but also implementing extensive community policing efforts so that police are more visible and the relationships are improved throughout community. All of this is underpinned by efforts like this, but ongoing engagements that are going to be taking place across the West Side, as I mentioned, both at the block level but at the community level over the next several years to ensure that we follow through on the promise to these strategies. And I'm looking forward to helping to answer some of the questions that I'm sure you all have about this in our later session. Finally, as Tina pointed out, on your table, you have a QR code. For those of you that don't know how to use a QR code, just open up your camera, point it on the QR code, you'll see a little website pop up, just click it. That's a survey that we've put together. It's a multiple choice survey with a few questions also for you to answer in that we want to help guide our strategies. So for example, how do we incentivize people to get more engaged in block clubs? What kind of resources could we provide to see that happen? And what are your ideas, things that maybe you think we're not thinking of, but we need to, for how to improve this? So we're just asking and encourage all of you to please complete that survey. If you need help, there are city staff that will be walking around the room that you're free to grab and say, could you help me get this QR code thing to work? Because I know that's a newer technology. All right, with that being said, I'll turn it back over to Tina for our next activity. Thank you.
All right, the fun begins. And I'm looking to see, like, I know everybody's feeling crowded, but all the tables are pretty filled up. So there are a few little empty tables that don't have numbers on them. If you feel like you want to spread out a little bit, feel free to do that. So the QR code exercise that Tamara just explained, that's one of the things that we'd like you to work on. And then there should be one of these sheets at every table. Can you guys, everybody hold up one of these sheets at each table? If you don't have the sheet, holla. But it's only one per table. And it's one per table by design, because what we are asking you to do is, one, this is West Side. This is the West Side table, so somebody write in West Side. Figure out what neighborhoods from the West Side are represented at your table. That's how we'll know that we had a good reach into the full diversity of the West Side. So if Austin's in the house, North Lawndale, Westtown, whatever the neighborhoods are at your table, please fill those in. And then talking together, figuring out the 5 things that you think need to happen in order to make our city safe. It'd be great if you could rank them, and it would be great if you came to consensus, but I'm not forcing that. But the discussions for the next half hour will be both about filling in the questions that Tamara pointed out and filling in this sheet. At about 11 o'clock, the mayor, again, will be here, and as will the superintendent. They'll be walking around. I want to acknowledge 2 people who've come in. Our new superintendent for public libraries is here. Chris, where are you? And our new CEO for public schools is here. And a very important member of the police department, Chief Angel Navales. He is in charge of constitutional policing and reform. So we want you to know that we tried to get all the key people in this room to figure out both law enforcement response, but also the wraparound services, the human response, so that we can create a safe city. So we'll be walking around answering questions, if any of you have questions about the assignment, but if you could work together to create for each table a list, that would be incredibly important. Good? All right, we'll bother you in about a half an hour. Thank you.
So first of all, somebody told me as I looked around the room and saw so many people, so many great conversations, I think it was Alderman Mitz who said, this is how we roll on the West Side. So it's always a great pleasure and an honor to be here on the West Side. And let me just tell you, my folks joke that I spend so much time on the West Side that I might as well take up residence, and so maybe I'll do that at some point. But I feel very, very strongly, and if you've heard me speak before, you know that I've said this. I feel very strongly that as the West Side goes, so does Chicago. Your fate, the vibrancy of the communities here on the West Side is so important to who we should be as a city. You know this as well as I do. There are incredible, vibrant communities here on the West Side, and we've got to do a better job of telling that story to the rest of the city. People need to see how much you care about what happens in your communities, on your block, in your schools. All of the things that you've been talking about all morning, but frankly been talking about for decades, we need to amplify those stories about the care and concern of people here in the city of Chicago, and particularly on the West Side. I will tell you the story of why I really came to believe the fate of the West Side really is going to dictate what happens to us in the rest of the city. I got sworn into office in late May. That summer, we started what we called our Pulaski Corridor project, where we were looking at the various issues that were plaguing folks from the expressway to Lake Street. And I don't have to tell you, folks who live in that area, what the challenges are like, right? People coming from the suburbs using car and rail to come and score some dope. People waiting for those people to get off the various train stops to take them to the server of choice. And all the while, kids seeing all of that brokenness that adults were experiencing around them. So that's when we started to dig in deeper and say, we've got to do better on the West Side. We cannot have a West Side where it looks like the fires of 1968 were just put out. And as we started looking, for example, at Invest Southwest, we came, you can clap for that. We came to the West Side, and particularly to Austin, and here's what we learned. That every single year, Austinites spend $200 million on amenities in Oak Park. In Oak Park. So what that told us is a couple of things. Number one, there's real buying power here. And we've got to make sure that we tell that story. As I was talking in the first table that I was at, it is shameful that in too many West Side communities, you can't walk to get a decent cup of coffee or a healthy food and groceries, that you can't get pharmacies and amenities. So that's why Invest Southwest launched here on the West Side. That's why we are pouring literally hundreds of millions of dollars into communities on the West Side, and that's why I keep fighting the fight with, frankly, white businesses to say, you are missing out on a real opportunity. We want no one's charity. We want no one's charity, but what we want and what the community deserves is the same kind of opportunities that people in Lincoln Park and Lakeview have. So that is what this fight is about. But what I'll also say is this, and you all know it to be true. If we want safe, healthy, vibrant communities, we've got to invest in our young people and families at the earliest possible stage. We can't leave things to chance. What do we know about violence? Violence is the expression of poverty. And you know that in too many areas on the West Side, we have generational poverty where there haven't been investments in people or places in decades. So the fight here obviously is about community safety, but it's really about community vibrancy. We will continue the fight, and the police department will do that on gangs and guns. But the real fight, to bring lasting peace, to communities all over our city, and particularly here on the west side, is we've got to root out poverty, and we do that by bringing hope and opportunity. We bring that by bringing jobs and economic development into neighborhoods at the block level. So the fight that you all have been fighting is a fight that we share in City Hall. Every single one of these commissioners, and the ones that aren't here, understand that all of their work must be viewed through a public safety lens, because that is the moment that we are in. That is what this time demands. And look, I understand that many of you have been in this fight for decades. We're joining tables that you set, not ones that we created. And I also understand that for many of you, you're sick and tired of feeling afraid, of feeling like you can't walk down the street safely, that you can't drive in your car without the fear of somebody coming up to you with a gun at a stoplight and trying to take your car and, God forbid, your life. So we are in this fight with you every step of the way, and that's why gatherings like this for all of us is so important. We don't presume to know what your life is like. Now, we've been here deep for now 2+ years, but we know that we have to learn from you. We come into these discussions with a humble heart and, importantly, a listening ear, not presuming that we know best for you. But if we're going to create real and lasting peace in communities across the west side and the south side, we have to be in this together. We have to be in this fight together. And here's the last thing that I will say, and then I will sit down and we will kind of go through the rest of the program. I want you to understand that I recognize that you haven't seen a mayor in many instances come to your community like we have been. You haven't seen investment like we have made. But this is not the end. It is a milestone on a longer journey. We are not going to be able to turn around all of the challenges that you all face by snapping our fingers. It's not going to happen in a year or even in an election cycle. But it's important for you to know we are here and with you for the long haul, for the long haul. So I know sometimes when you feel like you haven't had anything and somebody comes to you and talks about resources and opportunities, it feels like, well, this is my one shot. It's not your one shot. We won't turn around the fortunes of the West Side by being episodic. We've got to be here consistently. And I want you to hear me as mayor. We aren't leaving. We aren't leaving until you have created, with our help, the kind of quality of life that you deserve, that you expect, and that frankly people in other parts of the city take for granted. So somebody say, the West Side is the? West Side. All right, thank you so much for being here, everybody.
Thank you, Mayor. That was exhilarating. I want to just both catch you up and make sure the community knows who's on the stage. And so we spent about a half an hour or so with the tables working on priorities and public safety, and also doing an overview of CSCC, our comprehensive response to public safety. And so with that in mind, on stage, I'm going to start at the end, we have the superintendent of our libraries, Chris Brown, the commissioner of our libraries, Chris Brown. We have the CEO of our public school system, Pedro Martinez. We have our commissioner for the Department of Family and Support Services, Brandy Kanazi. We have our chief for the Community Safety Coordination Center, who you heard from earlier, Tamara Mahal. We have our fabulous head of public health, Dr. Allison Arwady. The mayor. And Superintendent David Brown of the Chicago Police Department. We have a range of questions. You can see my little piles, and I explained to the community members that we would be sorting them into piles. And so I'm going to jump right in with some. Again, we won't read all the questions, but I think most of the questions will be covered. So the first question is, CSCC and your public safety response is a multiple agency coordination. Which agencies are involved, and is there some sort of hierarchy? Who is the decision maker?
Well, before I jump in and I'll pitch it to Tamara, I also want to acknowledge two of the, I think just two, West Side electeds who are here. Alderwoman Emma Mitz. Emma. And you know with Emma, you do not play. You bring it, you be real, and one of the reasons why I love her so much. And of course, another West Side Alderman, Walter Burnett. Thank you, Walter. So let me set the table, and then I'll pitch it to Tamara. Look, we learned a lot through COVID about breaking people out of silos, about collaboration, and really the importance of being with community. And so we really started to think, and I'll credit our Chief of Staff, Sybil Madison. Sybil, where are you? Where are you? Back there. In the back of the room. We started having this conversation really over the course of last summer. What do we do as a city government to augment the work that the police department is doing? Because as we all know, you cannot just arrest your way out of the challenges of public safety, particularly if you believe, as we do, that there's a lot of root causes to the problems that are manifesting themselves as violence. So borrowing a page from our COVID response, we did a couple of things. We stood up the CSCC, and the core parts of it are this. We brought literally everybody in city government that was working on any aspect of community safety physically together in the same room. Why is that important? It's important, obviously, that the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. It's important because it allows people to collaborate, and that's where innovation happens. And to make sure that we are filling the gaps and the voids that might be existing. We're focused on 15 communities, 55 particular beats that are driving a significant amount of the violence, but we need to be coordinated as a city government to be able to respond to that. Part two, and really 1A or 1B, however you want to call it, is being in concert with community. So one of the things that I think we were most successful in doing through COVID was forming something called the Racial Equity Rapid Response Team. And what is that? When we learned in April of 2020 that Black people in Chicago were dying at 7 times the rate of any other demographic, we knew we couldn't just present this information to the public, that we had to have a real plan. And that's really where RERRT arose. We went to West Side United because they had been doing great work in communities on the West Side and to help educate people. And their objective, of course, was to shrink the life expectancy gap that Black folks all over the city, but particularly on the West Side, were experiencing compared to your white counterparts and residents. So what we learned through that process, and we started out looking at the communities where we were seeing the highest number of Black deaths, we widened our aperture and brought in the Latino and Latina community, and looked at the challenges there. What we learned is you can't do a one-size-fits-all approach, that there are a lot of great community tables that have already been set. There's a lot of stakeholders that are working on these issues, and that when we work together in collaboration, we get more done. So we took that same approach with the CSCC. We called it the launch committee, and I've been telling the team, we're past the launch stage. It's 5-6 months in, but the concept is exactly the same. In the communities where we are trying to make a significant difference in community safety, we are looking to and building upon partnerships and collaborations with community members who are at the table, on the blocks, and saying, what do we need to do to make your community safe? So I'll stop there and then pitch it to Tamara.
That was a pretty good overview. I think to the specific question about who is in the room, we think it's really important from the city's side that we're representing kind of the 3 major areas that make up our government departments. So that includes public safety, infrastructure, and human services. So in the CSCC itself, working day to day, we have representatives from departments that include the Chicago Police Department, the Department of Public Health, the Department of Family and Support Services, CPS, Parks, the Police Department, Streets and Sanitation, Housing, a lot of different departments that are working together on a day-to-day basis to break down those silos. But I will say a really important component and something that we did learn, especially during our vaccine operation, was how important it is to have community engagement sitting not just at the core of what we do, but leading what we do. And so we also have been working with organizations and philanthropic partners to actually hire new community engagement managers who work to represent and advocate for their community in the CSCC. Those managers are being hired now for West Garfield Park, North Lawndale, Little Village, Inglewood, and we're going to continue to add them on to ensure that they're sitting in the room and working directly with us, but most importantly, that they are people that live and work in the communities that they are representing. I do want to point out we have a lot of CSCC staff in the room today. I'm extremely proud of our team. They all volunteered for this. They're all taking jobs because they live in the communities that we are working to support, and quite frankly, they experience the violence that we are working to stop, and they provide valuable insights on a daily basis that guide our strategy in support of community. I do want to say one comment about who's the decision maker. And so, yes, I sit at the head of the CSCC. Obviously, I work for the mayor. She's the decision maker on the city assets. But I want to make it clear that our strategy is built genuinely on what is needed in the community. And so when it comes to, hey, where are we going to put speed bumps and cul-de-sacs, because we know that they're a kind of a violence reduction strategy, we're going to the block level to say, you help us, and I'll help you prioritize to make sure that this resource gets to your community. And so I do just want to comment that that is the lens through which we see everything, which is what did the community say? And most importantly, let's not just work with one or two specific organizations, but let's set up multiple pathways to ensure that our engagement strategy is, yes, based on the representatives that have been elected, is based on the leaders, the faith leaders, the community-based organizations that are there, that we also have pathways for engagement like this so that we're hearing directly from you about the strategies that you need, and we can help to prioritize those resources.
And this is from Jesus Del Toro. What does mending the trust between police and community members look like? What needs to be done to get there? And then related to that, from Maria in Garfield Park, the most valuable resource is people, sort of what you were saying, Tamara. How do we work collaboratively to bring out the best in each one of our neighbors?
That's a really, really good question, the last part. I'll start and then I'm going to ask the superintendent to jump in. Look, I think we live in a very difficult time. There's no question about it. And it was difficult way before COVID hit. But I think COVID has exacerbated a lot of tensions and frustration and anger that people have been feeling for a long time. And I don't need to tell you all in this room about that. But the one thing I would say, really picking up on the last question, is I think we've got to figure out a way to give people grace. We've got to figure out a way to not demonize people who have a different perspective and opinion. You know, in our participatory democracy, it depends upon us being to come together and find consensus. And yet the toxicity of our public debate and our civic discourse is if you aren't, rigid in your views, then somehow you're lesser. And if you find somebody who doesn't agree 1,000% with what you advocate for, somehow they're the lesser. A big part of the work that we are trying to do around community safety is finding that common ground, giving each other grace, giving people the ability to vent their spleen after being ignored for decades or a lifetime in many instances. And so as a public official, you got to have a tough skin. We all know that. But we've also got to grant each other the grace and to recognize that we really fundamentally all want the same thing. We want peace, we want a vibrant community, we want life where we can build a great family, a great community, pass on wealth, and not just material wealth, but the wealth that comes from wisdom. And we can't get there unless we find that common ground with each other. And on the question of trust in the police, really to me, the answer is the same. We have a long sordid history of policing in this city, where too much has happened that hasn't been accounted for. And by accounted for, I meant that people haven't been held responsible for. But I'll also say this. I'm looking in particular at the young officers that are in this room. They came to the job because they wanted to help people at great sacrifice. This is one of the hardest times to be the police, probably in the history of policing. And they literally risk their lives every day to keep us safe. And that came home loud and clear with the murder of Ella French. But even beyond that, in 20 and 21, and already this year, we've seen record numbers of circumstances where uniformed police officers, right? Not the folks that were in plain clothes and a plain car, but uniformed police officers are getting shot at, right? So we've also got to make sure that we understand the perspective of the officers as well. We need our officers to be supported. We need them to be supported particularly with training, because we want them to be doing their job in a respectful, constitutional way. We need them to understand something about community other than just the crime statistics. And that's why, frankly, the superintendent has placed such an emphasis on positive community interactions. What does that mean? That means get out of your car and have a conversation with somebody in a circumstance where it's not a lights and siren and lock them up moment. Because that's the only way, in my understanding, that we're going to be able to build real trust. That the police see you for who you are as their neighbors and recognize that their most valuable tool is that community trust and having the community on their side. And for you to feel like the dollars that we spend on policing are actually making a difference every single day in your quality of life. And that when you need them, that they will be there for you in a respectful and constitutional way.
And I'll just add just a little bit to what the mayor is saying, agree wholeheartedly with everything she said. But in addition to that, just think about building trust with the community from a policing standpoint, like any relationship that's been broken. And you're the partner that broke the relationship. Now you've got to do more for that person to trust you. Mm-hmm. You have to come humble, willing to do more to build that trust. And you know, when it initially starts to get built, it's fragile. It's so easy to lose. And many people here have been in relationships where you're the person that broke the relationship for whatever reason, whether you cheated or whatever reason, and now it seems like you can't do enough to keep that relationship going. But if you value the relationship, and we do, we absolutely need the community to be able to be successful. There's not a strategy in policing today to be successful without the community. So we absolutely have to be that partner in the relationship between police and the community that does more to be able to build our trust. And here's what we're asking the community, because you're safer when you trust us. When you trust us to give us information, you're safer when you trust us to tell us what's happening in the community, to tell us when it's happening in the community, who's starting the issues that lead to violence. So it's in your best interest to accept our efforts to build trust. So I know we broke that relationship. And some of you have personal experiences where the police did things to break that relationship. But we are committed to you taking us back. We are. We're committed. And just tell me what, I know, flowers, candy, cookies, whatever we gotta do, birthdays, Valentine's Day, we'll make up a day just to say how much we care about the community, how much we absolutely love you and care about you. And it's gotta be for real, you gotta feel it to where you now are a partner in our relationship. So, you know, I could talk for days about building trust, but just think about your relationships. When that trust is broken, then what that partner's got to do. That's what we're committed to doing. Thank you.
Well, fear not. Now, fear not, the community has given some suggestions on what you can do.
I think he said I got to take him out to dinner.
That too. That's not on the cards, though. One thing, and it's not a question but a flag, you know, when police warrants are served and property is damaged and there's no reimbursement to fix the property, I don't know if that's true or not, but that was brought up. There is a concern or a question about...
Well, let me just pause on that. That shouldn't be a thing. If somebody comes and damages your property from the city of Chicago, police or otherwise, there is a claims process. And if you're not getting that fixed, call 311 and we will make sure that we get that addressed immediately. That should never, ever, ever be a thing.
Thank you.
We break it, we own it, we fix it.
And if 311 doesn't work, community engagement at cityofchicago.org. So the other question is, because we are a city that's living with the legacy of racist police officers, are there some specific questions or screening to do, including polygraphs, with specific questions to root out racist officers?
I'll take that. Yes, there's ways we vet the background of our officers and try, but as you know, it's difficult. The real issue is we need a more diverse police department. That's the real issue, that we need more people representing the community. And we recently did some significant things to be able to create a larger and larger pool of very diverse candidates. We're expanding our waiver for 60 hours of college to other professions other than just military. So if you are someone in your family or someone of your friends want to be a cop, now we'll waive 60 hours if you have 2 to 3 years life experience as social service worker, corrections, jails, healthcare services, education, any experience, work experience in the trades, because that is a more diverse workforce than just law enforcement and military. And it's a more broad workforce with other life experiences that we sorely need in this profession. Just college alone doesn't get us the skill sets we need, and we know that, and we've seen that. That's what we've had since 1998, college alone, and we've seen some of the failures of only considering people with 60 hours of college. So soon to come, a more diverse workforce, particularly black and brown, is our focus, along with my personal focus is more women in this profession. More women need to be leaders in this profession.
And if I can just add, one of the great pleasures that I get to have is going to graduations for police and for fire. And I sit on this stage like this one, I look out into the audience, and I always take a moment to kind of study the graduates. And here's what I know. Every single one of those graduates that passes the stage, that becomes a policeman, a fireman, is walking into a middle-class life, secure financial future, with incredible benefits. And if black folks don't take advantage of that opportunity, we are missing out. There are 3 sure ways that we can, as a city government, that we can create good paying, well benefits, middle class jobs. It's called police, fire, and teachers. Police, fire, and teachers. And look, again, we're realistic about the history and legacy and the presence of the Chicago Police Department, but I believe, as the superintendent does, one of the surest ways that we solve that legacy and don't keep repeating it is by having people of color and women in those jobs. It makes sense from a policing standpoint, It makes sense from a building wealth standpoint. But the other thing I will add is because, look, like in any profession, screening on the front end, when you're talking about a career that can last 20, 30 years, in some instances longer, is not enough. We've got to make sure we're building in institutional controls and standards so that we hold people accountable on that journey. All the more reason why we've got to make sure that the supervisors, the sergeants who every single day touch more police officers than any other supervisor in the chain of command, the lieutenants, the captains, the district commanders, they also must be reflective of the diversity of our community. And so, but you can't get there unless you create the pipeline on the front end. And again, I'm sure there's folks here sitting like, there is no way in fill in the blank that I'm going to encourage a young man or woman to be a police officer. But you get the quality of policing that you demand. And it can't just be a police force that doesn't look like and represent the diversity of our city. And I'm telling you right now, we are at a critical juncture for black men and women to enter this profession in the city of Chicago. If you want to change things around from the long term, help us recruit folks to come into policing with a community sensibility born of being a member of communities like the communities on the West Side. That's critically important.
One of the biggest groupings of questions were about funding for the police, and I'm going to read the one that was written by Corinne Smith, because I think she captured everyone's comments in her question. How are you really addressing root causes of violence when you spend more on the police than you spend on public health, violence prevention, homeless services, and mental health services combined?
Well, look, those of you who know me know that I'm very candid. I absolutely, fundamentally reject defunding the police. I don't support it, and here's why. In our city, defunding the police means cutting personnel, because 95% of the police budget is personnel. So if we defund, we're going to do it by giving the union rules by reverse seniority. And what does that mean? That means we are getting rid of the youngest, most diverse, best trained officers that we have in the police force, which means, going back to the question that I just answered, that we are cutting black and brown young men and women that we need to build a diverse and more responsive police force. Now, let me just finish, folks. Let me just finish. To me, it's not in, ma'am, I need you to be respectful. I need you to be respectful. I need you to be respectful. It's not, for me, it's not an either or decision. We don't fund one or not fund the other. We have to do both. And that's what we've been doing. In our budget that was just passed last fall, we committed $1.2 billion in mental health, in affordable housing, in making sure that we're supporting young people, in violence prevention, in a lot of the other things that I hear when I talk to people about this defund question and really try to understand what they mean. What I hear by and large is we don't want the police department to be the only thing that's funded, because community safety isn't just about the police, and I agree, 1,000%. Community safety has to be about making concrete, specific investments in human capital in places. And if you look at our budget over the last 3 years, and we'll do the same thing again this coming year, we agree that we must make these kinds of strategic investments in people. If you were here when I talked at the beginning, what you heard me say was, we've got to make investments in people and places that haven't been made for decades and generations, because the starving of resources from communities is exactly what has exacerbated and created the problems that we are now trying to solve on a bigger scale.
And so, there's another pile of questions. I always love juxtapositioning these, that ask, why aren't there more police on the West Side? Why is our response time so slow? And why are you making can you make the district smaller so we can have more police in our neighborhoods?
I love all of those questions.
Sure.
You want to start? And
I'll start taking them. So yes, we do have vacancies that have been compounded due to COVID from 2020 and 2021. Of course, we couldn't give as many in-person tests. Actually, we didn't give any in-person tests for the police applicant in 2020. And so 2021's vacancies compounded with 2020's. But we are catching up with filling our vacancies. And the pool of candidates that's coming through, they are more diverse. More black and brown and women candidates are in our police academy. So the future for diversity is bright. Filling our vacancy is going to be a challenge, but we have made progress. The day we announce our expanded waiver for 60 hours of college, 400 candidates applied for the job. We have been averaging 100 candidates applying for the job every week. So 4 times what we normally get, and a very diverse pool, people from all over the country that were born and raised in Chicago who couldn't get hired here, had to go somewhere else, want to come back home. And so we created an opportunity for more people to come back home and be Chicago cops in a more diverse pool. Secondly, we prioritize the West Side in staffing. So we send not only the district patrol officers to the West Side, we also send our community safety team, an additional 100 officers, and we specifically dedicate those officers to the 11th district, but we also send some to the 10th and the 15th district. So the West Side is our priority. So goes the West Side mayor. Is not exaggerating, and it's not cliche. If the West Side crime is down, citywide crime is down. So we have to be successful on the West Side, and we have to do it in the right ways that builds trust. We can't stop and frisk. We can't mass incarcerate. We have to be here present with you when there's no crisis to build your trust with resources, with real numbers, committed to staying on the West Side and in these neighborhoods. So more to come, but again, we had impact on COVID. There's a little bit of an impact on generation resignation where young people are just deciding to take a break, but we are making progress. We are building our staffing, and finally, we are committed to the West Side districts.
And let me just add, if I can. You heard a lot of noise probably 6 weeks ago about tactical teams. And for those of you who don't know, those are the plainclothes guys. I've never seen a job where tactical teams, where officers are so quick and desperate to get out of their uniform and get into plainclothes. But the tactical teams are a critical part of our public safety. And let me just say that we are also holding them accountable. You know what you're experiencing on the West Side. And I've been very clear and blunt, as has the superintendent. No one gets to sit it out. No one gets to sit it out. If you're not producing, if you're not making sure that you wake up every day and get on your shift to say, how can I do more? How can I do better? How can I make sure that I am moving the needle on violence in the areas in which I'm assigned? We don't want them. They're in the wrong job. We are paying our police officers, you well know, a lot of money, and they got fantastic benefits. Nobody gets to sit it out. They've got to be part of the fight. And so questions that you should be asking when you go to your beat meetings, when you meet with your district commanders, is what's the productivity of the tactical teams? And that will tell you a story. And we've been very clear, and the superintendent has been very clear, if you're not going to produce, if you're not going to do your job, you're not going to be on a tactical team. You will be back in uniform, chasing 911 calls, because our residents deserve all of us to perform at a level of excellence in this crisis of gun violence, and nobody can or will sit it out, not on our watch.
So we're running out of time, but I've got 3 questions that I think we need to cover. So the first is in the area of mental health. What are the districts on the west side participating in the alternative response to police? What type of resources are going into mental health? And sort of moving question is what are the proper steps to help someone who is struggling with a mental health crisis? So.
You want to start and take the last part first and then talk about what we've been doing?
Yeah, sure. I'll start and then anybody can chime in there. So to chime in on that prior question, mental health is a major problem. It was before COVID. It's gotten worse during the time of COVID. And in particular, different than a lot of physical health issues, we see mental health issues typically arise in the teenage and sort of 20s years, and then can have these lifelong impacts. And so under Mayor Lightfoot, we actually have had a tripling of the mental health budget at the Department of Health. And we've been working to say, yes, it's about clinics and high quality clinics, but even more than clinics, it's about getting mental health resources outside the walls of those clinics to the people who maybe are not raising their hand and saying, I need mental health issues, I can make a 10 a.m. appointment on a Thursday. So one of the things we're most excited about is a brand new thing. For the first time ever in Chicago, CDPH has mental health clinicians embedded in the 911 call center. So where folks are calling and there's needs and we can resolve, and yeah, it's good. And we're thinking about those call takers, that trauma, that stress, thinking about the responders. So the first part is when folks are calling 911, let's get mental health into that part of the response. The second part is about embedding mental health clinicians in mental health crises, because what's in the middle of that? Health, mental health crises. We've never done this before. And so just a few months ago, we've started in a couple of pilots. There are CDPH mental health clinicians who go out with the CIT trained police officers, with EMS, the ambulance from CFD, when somebody has a mental health crisis. And the police officers are there to make sure the scene is secure, to make sure if there are things that need to be reported, that happens. The EMS, the CFD folks are there in case there's a medical need going on, there's something that needs to be addressed there. But really, it's about that mental health clinician trained in crisis response, because our goal is to treat this as a health emergency, to have folks be able to get connected on the spot to care, to shelter, because often those are linked. Sometimes folks do need to go to a psychiatric emergency room type setting, but most of the time in the opening months of this trial, in this pilot, we've been able to resolve those issues on scene, get people connected. We stayed for hours if we need to this question of how do I get somebody in crisis, how do I get this connected? Those teams are on the ground doing that. But then the third part is, how do we think about the mental health system? So the crisis response is what people may call for, and people may only know to call 911. 988 is going to be launching next year. That's a nationwide emergency number for mental health, suicide issues, where you don't have to call 911. The idea is you can call all over the country 988 and get a first and foremost mental health response. And yeah, this is taking this seriously. This is saying let's put health back in the center of these responses. The third part, just quickly if you don't mind, is after that crisis response, where are we bringing people? Because very often, people with mental health issues also have substance use disorders, addiction issues, and sometimes there is a lot of overlap around violence, domestic violence, interpersonal violence. And when somebody's having a mental health crisis, we don't just want to get them mental health care. We want to take care of the substance use issues. Where that's overlapping with folks experiencing homelessness, we want to have a safe place to bring folks. So as part of the American Rescue Plan funding that the city's received, for the first time, the city is planning to actually create highly supportive housing for people with mental health and substance use disorders that say, we'll take you no matter what your issue is. Because we've got a lot of people right now falling through the cracks, right? They're homeless, but they can't get into shelter because they've got substance use issues. They have a mental health problem, but they can't take care of this. And coordinating this care in the same way we're thinking about coordinating safety is what it takes. And so, I would encourage, we've been working to create lots of ways for folks to get connected. If you're not sure, you call 311 actually. You don't just get the 311 operator, they will transfer you to someone who can help with the mental health concerns. So we're building a network. There's a lot more to come, but please know we are in this and extra committed to this. And it's been, real new investments.
So let me just also invite Dr. Arty to talk for a moment about one of the other components of the question, which is, how do we have those conversations? How do we start to make sure that as a loved one, a friend, a family member, that when people are in crisis, that we have the tools to start those uncomfortable conversations. Because look, biggest part of that, we can build the network, we can provide the resources, we can make sure that we empower the clinicians, but if people don't seek help when they need it because of their fears of stigma, then we have lost the battle before it's even been waged. So if you could, Allison, just talk a little bit about what we've been doing to try to equip everyday folks with the tools to have those conversations, to get somebody that they love and care about, that they see is really struggling, into the circle of care, so that they can start to address those challenges. And we're not talking about folks that have a DSM diagnosed condition. All of us are struggling. Who wouldn't be after the 2 years that we've been through? And many of us were struggling way before then. So we've got to destigmatize the notion that when you're hurting and when you have pain, that you can get help and assistance.
So briefly, we started something under the mayor called Trauma-Informed Centers of Care. Trauma-Informed Centers of Care are places in neighborhoods that provide mental health care and support for neighborhood residents that by definition take people regardless of their income, regardless of their insurance status, regardless of their immigration status. We started on some of the south and west sides where a lot of the needs are greatest, but again, with additional funding, we are expanding this citywide because I want a network of no wrong door. And more than that, I want to get this out of clinics. So we've been partnering with libraries, we've been partnering with CPS, we've been partnering with the Department of Family and Support Services to say, what can we do to have social workers available? Sometimes people are more comfortable talking to a social worker. We've been funding social workers in food pantries. We've been funding mental health providers and substance use treatment providers in every homeless shelter in the city of Chicago. New, important, way more to go. We're also going to be launching a campaign called Unspoken, because quite often we don't talk about mental health in the same way that we talk about physical health. And I believe so strongly, and CPS also with their social emotional learning, how do we create a culture of talking about our mental health in the same way that we talk about our physical health? How do we recognize and build, some of you took the vaccine ambassador course where we had available through city colleges free. Anybody who wants to learn better how to talk about vaccine, we want to recreate that. How do you talk to folks? Talking about mental health struggles does not make people more likely to commit suicide, does not make them more likely to have a bad outcome. Recognizing signs of mental health challenges that we all have at different points, talking about them openly, and getting people connected outside of the health system that still carries too much stigma is what I think we have to do long term, and we're only going to do it by thinking about, through all the work we're doing, how do we have this just infused at all points.
Youth, the other big pile. I know you guys thought you were going to get out of it. No. There's so many questions about youth, I can't compile them into one, but this was my favorite. This is my favorite of the youth questions. They were all great, arts and more investments, but how do we plan to empower the youth in these underserved communities so that they can actually see that they have as many options for success, financial, educational, et cetera, as others?
I will start, and then I will pass it to the folks who are engaged in these issues every day. And really the question is the answer. How do we make sure that young people all over our city, regardless of the circumstances into which they are born, the circumstances in which they are currently living, feel opportunity, hope, and importantly, love? I'm a firm believer that our young people are part of the adult ecosystem around them. And sometimes that's challenging to create that kind of adult ecosystem that mirrors and reflects the positivity that we need our young people to feel from the moment that they have consciousness as people. So we're doing several things that I think are the right investments and the right strategy, but again, we need that feedback from all of you, particularly those folks that are interacting with young people on a daily basis. So let me start talking about a few of the things, and then I'll pitch it down the line. We know that way too many black and brown kids are showing up in kindergarten not ready to learn. It's a staggeringly low number. The number for Latinos is in the low 30s, and for blacks in the high 20s. Ready to learn based upon a variety of different metrics. What does that mean? That means that when they get to kindergarten, they're behind already. That means that we've got to work that much harder to get them by third grade to be confident, literate learners for life. So what that says to us is we got to start way before third grade and preschool. We've got to start supporting those young people at the and their families at the earliest possible stage. The earliest possible stage. I'm going to ask Dr. Arwady to talk a little bit about the Family Connected program, and then I'm going to go down the line. I don't, probably Pedro Mini, you go next, and then Chris and Brandy. Talk about the investments that we're making with our young people at all ages. And here's the thing, folks. We spend in the city, and have historically, a lot of resources around kids once they get to the preteen and teenage years. And we're going to continue to do that. But if we want to stop the pipeline of young people getting to that proverbial crossroads and making the wrong decision that has implications for the rest of their life, we got to start way, way earlier in reaching these children and their families, children, not just young adults, not just preteens. We'll continue to support that cohort because that's important. But we also got to make sure that by the time they're in 5th grade, right, they know that the world is available to them. They've just got to figure out what their passion is. And that right there in their neighborhood, in their school, they've got opportunity at their fingertips. That's the goal. That is what we are driving towards. Now, again, we're not there yet. I don't want to mislead you. But we are making the kinds of investments and decisions, working collaboratively together and working with our partners at the neighborhood level, where we are building that kind of ecosystem to support our young people, because our kids are in crisis. And if we don't recognize that, If we don't recognize that, we're going to lose another generation, and I'm not going to let that happen on my watch.
So, yep. So I love that we're starting actually with public health and with Family Connects, because often when we talk youth, we are thinking older kids. But Family Connects, public health is about prevention at the end of the day. There's health care, which is the repair shop when you've got a problem. Public health is how do we create healthy environments, healthy settings, healthy opportunities for everybody. So we start right when the baby is born. And we have a program called Family Connects. We had started prior to COVID in 4 hospitals. Rush is one of the ones on the west side here. That every baby that is born, regardless of anything, every baby that is born gets a nurse visit in the hospital when there's a lot of excitement often around the baby, a lot of family around, make that initial connection. They're getting a really nice baby book that is not just what to do with your kid, but you are raising a child in the city of Chicago. How can you know what is available at all the stages as we grow? But then, 3 weeks later, which is when some of the excitement wears off, the family tends to go home, the postpartum depression kicks in, this becomes very real. 93% of families in the city of Chicago at that point have unmet needs. So that same nurse is going to the home, doing a big conversation with the family about, has baby gotten the medical care? Has mom gotten the medical care? Knowing that maternal mortality, morbidity is a major problem. But more than that, what other needs does the family have? Not in this is open to everybody in the city. This is not in any way looking for problems. It's asking what folks need and then bringing it to community tables where we're working to coordinate all of the resources that are available for young babies. Our goal, again with ARP funding, is to bring this to every baby born in a birthing hospital in the city of Chicago. It'll take time, but starting at the beginning, getting families connected to resources in their neighborhoods and to each other, getting some of that support, talking about mental health from the beginning, we think lays the beginning of the groundwork.
So first of all, for those of you who don't know me, I actually grew up in Chicago, grew up on the Lower West Side, so I'm a West Sider. A couple of things that you're going to see for the next school year. So first of all, for the first time ever that I've ever seen in our district's history, we're making sure that we're setting a standard for what all of our children should have in our schools. And what I mean by that is, for example, making sure that there's no school in our system, especially on the west side, that has large class sizes. Everything has to be reasonable or small class sizes. Making sure that every child has access to the arts. Making sure that every child has access to PE and other programs. No exception, everybody. Making sure, that's part of every school, and hold us to this. Making sure that if your child is struggling, whether they're in preschool or whether they're in 12th grade, there's actually intervention teachers, so actual certified teachers and classes that actually are there to support your children. Every school will have intervention teachers. Every school, if they need summer programming, and this is the district is going to be providing, so instead of schools trying to figure it out on their own, we're committing to every one of our schools summer programs for children who need extra support, as well as Saturday and after school programs. And by the way, some of those are with community partners, so thank you community partners for being part of that. Every school will have that in place, everybody, every school. That's one. The other is, and this is really, two really big bookends that we want to invest in. One is a very strong early literacy initiative. We have to have our children literate before they go to 3rd grade, everybody. We got to catch them in their pre-K to 2nd grade. So there's investments in preschool, there's investments in making sure that we're working with our children from pre-K to 2nd grade, and then making sure that right now, our high schools are very strong. I'll tell you, our high schools overall are very strong. We had a record graduation rate last year. We're on track for that again this year. We're seeing record numbers of scholarships. But here's the thing, everybody. We cannot stop until we have one of these amazing schools in every neighborhood. So for example, and I love Michelle Clark and Charles Anderson, one of my favorite principals, but Austin High, Douglas, we got to get them to that level. We got to get Crane to that level. We got to get Collins to that level. So we gotta, and that's something that I want to work with the community, because we got to have them, because we know how to do them. We know how to do them, so let's work together to do that. But I want to make sure we, again, strong on preschool, early literacy, continuing to invest in our high schools, and making sure that we have we should have strong schools in every single neighborhood, everybody. So that's more to come on that, more to come.
And I'll chime in from libraries. I'm really glad that we're here at this conversation, because the issue of learning and lifetime education, people can't do that if they don't feel safe. They need to have access to food equity. They need to have access to safe spaces in our neighborhoods. They can't do that profound work if they don't feel they're being taken care of. I'm just going to highlight some of the things that we're already doing thanks to Mayor Lightfoot. So we've gone fine-free. We are one of the first large city libraries in the country to go completely fine-free. And that has a huge impact on that question around youth engagement and support. 1 in 5 of our children library card holders had blocked accounts because of fees. So because of policies that are more inclusive, that, thanks to our mayor, more of our children can access that. We've also, this year, we've gone to provide Sunday hours in every neighborhood, which is huge, to give people a safe space in their neighborhood in every library in Chicago, again, thanks to our mayor. And then, since we're on the West Side, I also want to mention we've added U-Media spaces. Everybody in this room knows Chance the Rapper. He came through our U-Media program. They get mentorship and chances to develop digital skills. We've added those U-Media spaces to the Legler Regional Library, to the Austin Branch Library, and to the Douglas Library. So those are access and resources for our youngest, and I'm really proud to get to serve you all with the mayor.
Everybody, I'm Brandy Kanazi, and I represent the Department of Family and Support Services. So we serve the heart of the city, and we do provide services from early learning, so birth, all the way through the senior years. And so when we think about early learning, our investments are in teachers. We've got to make sure for our earliest learners that teachers have the right credentials, and they've got scholarships to get in school to make sure that they're able to support our young people. But also with the parents for our Head Start and our early Head Start programs, we make sure that parents have the supports they need from mental health, dentistry. We provide all of those wraparound services. When we move over to the youth space that we have, we've got 3 portfolios. Our enrichment program supports young people ages 6 to 21 who are engaged with school with enrichment and after-school activities. We support over 9,000 young people, and so that's STEM, STEAM, art, sports, really activities either during the school year that's after school or during the summer to make sure year-round they're engaged and we keep them engaged with school. And so a lot of our partners work within the school system and the libraries. Then when we move into our youth employment space, I get really excited with the mayor's investment this year. We've got $24 million that's supporting young people with jobs, right? And so we've been able to raise the wages that young people receive from $14 an hour. When I started with the department, it was $8 an hour. This summer, we're paying young people $15 an hour to have enriching activities, right? And so that is exciting. And so we're able to make sure that they have like a career pathway. And so they're in cohorts of 20 young people, and they're able to work with a youth coach to think about, what do you see for the future, right? So many times I remember when I was growing up, you got to see something to believe that it's possible. And so having that exposure and that opportunity is really important, especially as we think about summer jobs beyond the summer, but year round. And so that's some of the work that we're working on. When you think about creativity, at the beginning of the pandemic, so many of our young people really suffered because they weren't able to have that interaction, that in-person space. And so sitting on the computer just really didn't sit with them. They wanted to know, like, how do we make a difference in communities? And so we started the Chicago Youth Service Corps, which is really a civic engagement program that we took from a summer program in 2020. This year, we're able to make it into a year-long program where young people are able to really think about what's in my neighborhood, right? What do I feel that's lacking? And what's my capstone project where they present of, here's what I want to see. And so for the last couple of years, I've sat on these capstone projects and I've watched you talk about how do they do revitalization, right? Buying homes on their neighborhood and being able to rent them out and make money so they see that entrepreneurial spirit. They also are able to think about, I want to be a podcaster. And so they think about what are the questions we want to be able to ask. And so just all of those things. And so I just say again, that program now with our investments from Mayor Lightfoot is able to be year round. And then just lastly, for youth who are justice involved, we think about supporting them holistically, right? Giving them a voice to make changes and to set the trajectory. And so we're able to provide them with a coach that can help support how do we take them from the situation they're in and get them on a path to what is sustainability for them. And so I say all of those resources is really how we help to see people holistically within the department.
Thank you.
Mayor, we're a half hour over time, and I do want to flag one of our most important community partners, the Garfield Park Right to Wellness Collaborative, is hosting a similar event upstairs that is community-led. And I know some of you are doing double duty, so I wanted to be respectful of that. There are a bunch of questions that we're not going to be able to get to, but I want to just capture them. The role of faith in this movement to make our city safe. There were questions about guns, questions about drugs and open-air drug markets and how we can make our community safe from those. There were questions about funding and how to access funding. One of them, I want to flag, the person's asked, who is the person to talk to about getting funding? They are RFPs. We don't magically give out money. There's a process. The final set of questions, which are really a lot, different questions surrounding community development, starting with, have we considered reframing public safety as community wellness and vitality, which I know in our discussions as a senior team, we talk about that all the time. And then the final question, which I hope we can respond to, and Tamara, you may take this one, what's the next steps? What's going to happen after this engagement and the 5 other engagements that we're doing in the community? Will there be a report, a rollout? What will happen?
Oh man, I want to answer a lot of those questions too, which is good. So let's talk about next steps. So as I mentioned, we think one of the most important things we can do from a staffing perspective is actually build up engagement staffing, so that if you're living in our communities, you know who it is you can go to for actually those questions, whether it is faith, whether it's how do I get access to funding, or whether it's, hey, what tables should I be at so that I can work to help contribute here. I want to first highlight ongoing engagement efforts and say next steps from here, we do ask that you continue to get involved, attend your beat meetings with CPD, district meetings to make sure that you're involved and represented at that table. We are going to be continuing engagements. We're actually going to be setting up block level and community level planning events where we bring you back here, but with different types of city representation to essentially do intensive planning so that as you've brought up issues that we're actually going to be taking a look at, and you say, what is going on with that speed bump, or how can we get that vacant lot cleaned, and what kind of access can we get to that? We're actually starting to put the tangible work behind that to be able to address that for this summer as we move forward. And so be on the lookout for that. As Tina mentioned, we do have a partner here in West Garfield Park and East Garfield, the Garfield Park Right to Wellness Collaborative. We're working with them, but others as well. In North Lawndale, we're working with the NLCCC. And we're going to continue to expand to other communities to set up this type of planning so that we can really get down to the point of you're not only participating in that, but then you're actually starting to see the results rolling out on your block throughout the summer. In the meantime, I will note, if you have a particular concern, you are welcome to email cscc@cityofchicago.org, and we are working very hard to get back to everyone's concerns and start to prioritize where we see some issues laying out.
Thank you for that. This has been a wonderful convening of community. Everything that you have submitted is being saved and recorded. We will be emailing you out the list of all your recommendations because we're running out of time, and plus I'll be able to be grammatically correct. But I wanted to, as we close, look to the mayor and the superintendent and invite any closing thoughts.
Well, I would just say thank you. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for caring so much about your community. This feedback that we get, we try as best as we can to put into concrete action. Let me give you 2 examples from the West Side. I mentioned in my opening remarks that we started really engaging on the West Side, particularly West Garfield Park, starting in the summer of 19. Fast forward to last year, and as a result of the work that we were doing in West Garfield Park, my team came to me and said, the community really wants a roller rink. I said, a roller rink? I said, all the challenges in West Garfield Park, a roller rink? That can't be right. No. The community really wants a roller rink. And what I came to understand was, back in the day, there was a roller rink that was here, that was a great community gathering place. And so, as a result of the feedback that you gave us, we put resources, with your help, into taking an advantage strip right at the corner of Pulaski and Madison on the north side of the street. Used to be a bank, I think, and you now know that beautiful space was activated over the course of last summer. That's one example. Carl Brinson, Carl, are you still here? All right, Carl Brinson, who Carl and I have been knowing each other for a long time. We won't even talk about how long. But one of the things that Carl said to me again early on in my term as mayor is block clubs. Block clubs are so important. Block clubs really help create the vibrancy in community. And as a result of Carl, and you know Carl's persistent, he doesn't give up. But as a result of the conversations that we've had with him, we are spending a significant amount of money this year. And Tamara, I don't know when I'm going to steal your thunder a little bit. When are we announcing it? But we are taking the block club process away from the police department. It's now at the CSCC, and we're going to be putting real dollars into building and strengthening block clubs all over our city, particularly on the west and the south side. So when you talk about next steps, right, we listen as we must. We are here to serve you. We're not here serving ourselves, as sometimes, frankly, it feels like over time. We're here to serve you. We want to make sure that we are listening and that we are engaging with you so that we can then provide concrete proof of what collaboration looks like. The roller rink and the block clubs are just 2 examples that really emanated out of the West Side that I wanted to highlight. But that's what happens when we come to you, as I said before, with a humble heart and a listening ear, and work collaboratively with residents of our city to create a better life for everyone. And so that's what the goal is. There'll be bumps in the road. There'll be things that happen that we may not agree with everybody about all the time, and you may not agree with us, but know that we are here with you on this journey towards a better Chicago and a better West Side. So thank you all for being here today.
Everyone, onward, as they say. Thank you for being here.